always love seeing the iPhone screens flashing back at me. That's always good. That's where everyone's Bibles are these days, so there you go. Well, all right, folks. Well, we're going to take you through the second part of this journey of what happens to Paul on his voyage to Rome. Last week, we were starting this off where really Paul, hearing from Jesus that he would go and speak before Caesar, leaves Judea, which should have taken, if everything goes well, 5 weeks to get from Judea to Rome. Things have not gone well. As a matter of fact, it's been slow going. And then a part of that process, they got to the south side of Crete, and they're hoping to winter in this port, but a storm kicks out and then shoves them into the Mediterranean. If you were here last week, remember I explained to you that the Mediterranean is almost 1 million square miles of water. And Paul, and you can look it up in verse 26 of chapter 27, makes this statement, "We will be saved, but we must run aground on some island." And I showed to you that the island that they land on is Malta, which is 95 square miles, meaning finding a needle in a haystack. And so it's interesting because Paul is showing that God is faithful and makes this statement, we will be saved, but we're going to have to run aground on some island. We're going to pick the story up in chapter 27, verse 27, when it says, "When the 14th night had come, as we were being driven across the Adriatic Sea," at the time this was called the Adriatic Sea, but it's the Mediterranean, "about midnight the sailors suspected that they were nearing land." Now, remember, almost 1 million square miles of water, and the sailors all of a sudden are picking up what they call telltale signs they're nearing land. The reason why is, as waters get shallower, things begin to change. You also, because when there's just waves, they roll, but when waves hit land, things begin to sound different. There's different sound waves going on. So the sailors pick up on, hey, we're nearing land, which means Paul's statement of we must run aground is coming true. But watch what happens. So they took a sounding and found it 20 fathoms. A sounding is where you drop a weighted line into the water. When it bounces, you know that's the bottom. They're at 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took a sounding again and found 15 fathoms. So they know they're coming to land because the seabed is meeting or coming up to the surface. And fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. So they're being driven by this storm. They know they're approaching land. Now their fear is they're going to smack into land. So they take 4 anchors and drop them off the back of the boat, trying to slow them down. And this is what I want you to catch. And they pray for day to come. How many of you have ever been to a place where you're praying for day to come? Because you're in the darkness. You can't see. You have no perspective. You're in this place of like, I want to understand what I'm up against. I want to understand what's coming. And so they slow down, but they're praying for day to come. And there's been times in my life, and I'm sure in your life, you're going, I just want to know what's ahead. I want to see. I want the daylight to reveal to me that which is the obstacle before me. And that's exactly what's taking place. These anchors are meant to slow them down, and there's ways we try to slow things down. There's things that we try to do because we realize that we're being driven to a place we don't want to go. And we try to drag our feet because, again, the night is so scary. Verse 30. "And as the sailors were seeking escape from the ship and had lowered the ship's boat into the sea under pretense of laying out anchors from the bow." Let me explain to you what happened. The sailors, there are 3 groups on the ship. There are sailors, soldiers, and prisoners. The sailors are abandoning ship. The reason why is sailors know something. They can't control this ship. This is too big and the wind is driving it too hard. And if they hit the rocks, they know it's over. So guess what they do? Hey, let's act like we're putting out anchors on the bow. And they grab the lifeboat because this is what they believe. We can control the lifeboat. It's small enough we can control it. But if we stay on the ship and we hit the rocks, we're going to be destroyed. So the sailors all are going to try to jump on this lifeboat because they think they can be under control. Do you understand the feeling? Because don't we want to be under control? We want to be the ones that, hey, if we go down, it must be our fault. So these sailors, they can control the lifeboat, but they can't control the ship. And they believe they have a chance if they can get off. Watch what happens. Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved. Paul goes, listen, God told me that if we're going to be saved, they've all got to stay with me. If they leave this ship, we have a problem. I love this. The soldiers cut away the ropes of the ship's boat and let it go. Now think about that. The soldiers listened to Paul, a prisoner. Why? Well, Paul told them, yeah, the storm's going to be bad, but we're going to find land, and now they're coming to land. We found the needle in the haystack. And they're starting to believe this man of God is truthful in what he speaks. And if he says, they get off the ship, we go down, that boat's going. But can you imagine watching the lines get cut and that little boat just drifting away? You're like, no! Because it feels like there's a place for that. I will tell you, when I was working at the ranch, by the way, rope courses at camps are pretty much everywhere. Almost every camp has a ropes course. When I was working at the ranch, we were one of the first places that ever had a ropes course. And so we had a lot of groups that would come. And one of the parts is we did this thing called the trust fall. Many of you guys know it's even made fun of, where you you fall backwards into the hands of those around you. Many of you guys have seen that. We had a great one, though, because it had an optical illusion to it. You would stand on this post, and if you look back over your shoulder, the way the ground dropped away, you literally could not see the ground. It just dropped off to an edge. And then where the people were, you could barely see them. So when you fell, you just felt like you were falling into nothing, which was awesome, right? And we'd have brave guys standing there like, no, right? It's just awesome stuff. And so I took my youth group up there, and to show them how because we had some kids who were really freaking out about it, I said, I want none of the girls but the girls to catch me, right? So I had like freshmen, sophomore, junior girls, tiny little girls, this tall. And they're going to catch, and they're all like, he's going to crush us, and I'm up there going, I'm going to kill him. Anyway, but one of the cool things about this is on this post, right here, I'm not kidding, right here where I could grab was this one branch that came from a different tree right here, and we called it the limb of temptation. That's what we called it. Because here's what's so funny. You're there in this place, you know you're supposed to go back, but this thing feels so like, I just grab it, right? And I'm safe. But the problem is, when you grab this, then you don't go the direction you're supposed to go. So I'm there, and I'm for the first time, I'd done this fall a few times, but the first time looking at these girls, I'm like, oh, that looks really good. That looks really good. We even talked about taking an engraver and engraving temptation on the actual wood. But anyway, but I fell, and I didn't crush them. I hurt them, but I didn't crush them. So, but here's what's interesting. That's what that boat was. That's us in control. That's our escape. And they cut it away and said, we're all in this together. We're all in this ship together. Verse 33, as day was about to dawn, Paul urged them all to take some food, saying, today is the 14th day that you have been continued in suspense and without food, have been taking nothing. How many of you, if you skip a meal, become grumpy? How many of you, if you haven't slept well, become pretty much unbearable, all right? You're going to find out that these people have been under this stress. Think about it. For 14 days and nights, this has been an unrelenting storm to the point that they're not even thinking about eating. Because they think at any moment this thing is over. Any moment the ship goes down. At any moment this is over. Can you imagine being underneath that kind of stress for 12 days without it stopping? And again, folks, some of us can't handle. And here's what Paul does, which I think is interesting. He says, look, I need you to take some food. I need you to eat. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will give you strength. For not a hair is to perish from the head of any of you. See, they're going to need strength for what they're about to experience. He goes, look, and can I just tell you that one of the things we can do sometimes is be the people that when people are in high stress situations, example is what's happening to the Fairbairns, who's telling them, you know what you need to do? You need to eat, you need to rest. Because one of the things that happens is we let ourselves get so off the track that honestly, we're not good to anybody. We're not good to anybody. Paul's like, look, guys, I need you to eat. I know you're stressed, but I also want you to hear the calmness of this. Paul says, look, God's got this. Look what he says. And when he had said these things, he took bread and giving thanks to God, in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Just confidence. My God has this. And he breaks the bread. He prays in front of them, and so that they see that he has this trust in this God, who, by the way, he has said is going to run them to the ground, and that's what's happening. And he prays. And I want you to know they're beginning to listen to him. Then they all were encouraged and ate some food themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. And when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship, throwing out the wheat into the sea. Now, I told you last week that we were going to deal with this wheat issue. Now, let me explain. The owner of the ship built the ship to be what they call a wheat ship. A wheat ship is how he made his money. Wheat was a very valuable commodity. And so what he would do is he would fill the whole bottom of the boat with wheat. And then if there was room, they would take on cargo. Okay? Again, you pay me to take this from point A to point B. Here's what's interesting. Notice last week they threw the cargo overboard. Why? It's not my stuff. You ever notice? If it's not your stuff, it's easy to ditch other people's stuff. But he had not gotten rid of the wheat. Because against all hope, he's going to try to get this wheat to market. But at this point, realizing what's going on, they now throw the wheat overboard. And it's amazing what happens in our lives. Because remember I told you when you go on trips how you start with the big bags because you need all that stuff? And as you go along, you wish you only had the small bag. Again, I'm watching the Owls come in and they have the double stroller. I can't imagine how much stuff she has to take for 2 babies, right? But I'm telling you, by the time they get to baby 5 and 6, which will happen to them, she'll have it down to a backpack, right? And it's just how it goes. But it's interesting how we think we need all this stuff, and as we live, we realize we can do with so much less. At this point, the storm is causing them to get rid of all this extra stuff. Verse 39. Now, when it was day, they did not recognize the land. But they noticed a bay with a beach, and on which they planned, if possible, to run the ship ashore. Now, that's the best deal. If you could get it to a sandy beach, less damage happens to the ship. So they look at this, they see a bay. If we can get this ship to the beach, at least it runs ashore, we may be able to save a ship. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, and at the same time, loosening the ropes that tied the rudders, they then, hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the vessel aground, the bow stuck and remained immovable, and the stern was being broken by the surf. Because Paul told them the ship was going to go down. So this thing sticks, and as the waves pound the back of it, it's almost like it's just eating it from the back as it moves forward. Here's one of my favorite lines in this whole story. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any should swim away and escape. So we've made it this far, but we're not going to kill you guys. Because here's why. By Roman law, if a Roman soldier had a prisoner and the prisoner escaped, you killed the Roman soldier. This is a man for a man situation. So the soldiers are going, wait a minute, if we run aground, they can keep control of the prisoners, but if they swim for it and escape, it's my life. My dad in the military, he was a military MP, and his job actually was to fly all over the United States and take guys from different jails to where they would be tried in the military under a military tribune. And my dad has amazing stories of what happened on these trips. He says one of the things that would happen is you get on planes and they would take my gun away, and he goes, then you'd have these prisoners who thought they had a fighting chance. If you met my dad, that's why my dad got chosen to do this job. Because at least as big as he was, they didn't feel like they had a complete... My dad goes, I cannot imagine if I would have had to fight some guy actually in a plane, what would happen. But he goes, I was ready to go. Anyway, that's another story. But again, this issue is these soldiers are afraid of their own lives. If I lose these prisoners, but look what happens. But the centurion, the one in charge, wishing to save Paul. That's an important line. Paul has become the one who has, by the way, shown how faithful God is. Paul said, please don't take this trip. They took it anyway. Paul says, okay, we're going to survive this, but we're going to have to we're going to have to come up to some island. That has happened. Everything Paul has said has come true. Paul, the one who encouraged them to eat. Paul, who's saying, listen, not a hair on your head is going to be hurt. This centurion is starting to listen to this guy, Paul. In the same way, the centurion at the foot of the cross said, surely this was the Son of God. I think this centurion is saying, this man is where God is. I want you to hear this morning. What God needs more than anything is people who are where God is so that people have some place to look to find God. Who are faithful. Who are faithful to him and say, you know what, I trust him. I can't see what the island looks like. It's too dark, but I trust him. And I'm telling you, this centurion is now listening to a prisoner called Paul because Paul is faithful to his God. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make their way for land. Folks, people are just going to jump overboard and go for it. And the rest on planks or on pieces of the ship, and so it was that all were brought safely to land. And everything that Paul had said became true. We're going to come to an island. The ship will not survive, but you will. And they stand, all 276 of them, on a beach with nothing but the clothes they have on their back. Listen to this phrase. They have nothing but the clothes they have on their back. That will become very important in a little bit. And so what happens is they show up on this beach, and Paul goes, my God has been faithful. Everything I said would happen. And folks, what's interesting in these storms is sometimes that's where God wants to get us to. He takes everything away except that which we have on our back and goes, am I enough? Am I enough? And so now, Paul's still not at Rome. They end up on this island. Watch what happens in chapter 28, verse 1. I love how Luke writes this line. Luke is the author of this line. After we were brought safely through. He is giving all glory to God in this line. After we were brought safely through, we learn that the island was called Malta. The native people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us because it had begun to rain and was cold. They end up on an island, and the people love on them. The people, honestly, are kind to them. Let me tell you why this story connects with me. Last week, if you were here, I told you that when I was a freshman in high school that I got lost in the mountains in a pretty severe accident. I broke ribs, punctured lungs, and I had doctors say, you should not have survived, Jeff. There's just no way I should have survived. I'd fallen into an ice river. I was literally wet to the bone, and it was just really, really bad. So when we were so far off the beaten path that when we actually got found and they took us to the nearest ranger station, we had told ourselves, when we get found, we're going to walk in and they're going to be like, woo, right? Because we've been found. We go into this ranger station and we walk in and this lady goes, hi, how can I help you? We're like, we were lost. She goes, what? Yeah, you've been looking for us? No, we haven't. And all of a sudden a lady in the back goes, are you the group that's been lost on the south side? And we're like, yeah. She's like, oh, we were so far off the path. Now, here's the best part of the story. There's a lady, I don't know her name, I call her Barbara. Because in my brain, she looks like a Barbara, therefore that's what I call her. It is Christmas Eve day. They were just having their Christmas party. All of a sudden, this lady starts shoving Christmas cookies, and this is where I learned to love coffee, because I was cold, and it was hot, and it became glorious, and it's been like, oh, ever since, all right? So I am like, I had not really been a coffee fan until that day, but that day, Barbara gave me coffee. It was amazing, all right? So we are soaked, scratched, beaten. We go to this back room, and Barbara, this is what Barbara says. She goes, I raised 7 boys. None of you don't have anything I haven't seen. Every one of you stripped down so I can give you a warm blanket. Yes, ma'am. So, because she was not kidding. But I can tell you this. I am sitting with a blanket around me, with a Christmas cookie and a coffee, and felt kindness and love. Does that make sense? Because I'm feeling warmth from this storm that we were just in. I resonate with this. The natives people showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and welcomed us all because they had begun to rain and it was cold. And this Barbara just loved on us until our families could come and get us. It was such a hard trip. My dad, I told this story before, my dad had gotten up to the command center and gotten to the truck with a guy who was running the rescue for us. And the guy calling in didn't know my dad was in the truck, and the guy just called in and goes, hey, listen, if we don't get these kids off this mountain tonight, they're all going to die. And my dad just broke down in this car. God was with us and protected us, and the story goes, believe me, I can tell you all the details, it goes on, but I can tell you walking in, and when Barbara showed us kindness, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. Verse 3. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and put them on a fire, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened onto his hand. Wonderful. All right? Okay, so I've been on this shipwreck, swam to shore. This is my 4th shipwreck, by the way. I'm helping. I grab a bundle of sticks. In that is a snake. Oh, awesome. Phenomenal. Okay, watch this. Just love this. When the native people saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, no doubt this man is a murderer. Though he has escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live. Because these people believed in a basic concept of karma. He had done something bad. He murdered somebody. The sea tried to kill him. The sea didn't get him. So now a viper grabs a hold of his hand. That's their take on it. Oh, bad guy. Because and by the way, a lot of people work off of this. Oh, if one thing happens, another bad thing happens, it means they must have done something really wrong. Watch this. He, however, shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. Gets better. They were waiting for him to swell up or suddenly fall down dead. Because, folks, if a viper bites you, just pretty much stand and watch the show because there's nothing else you're going to do. And these natives were like, whoo, yeah, this should be fun. But when they had waited a long time and saw no misfortune come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Murderer? God. And it's amazing to me because it shows us a part of our humanity. Have you ever listened in on a conversation that is the stupidest conversation I have ever heard? And then in your brain goes, wait a minute, I've had conversations like that. Have you ever had that? Where if you listen, you're like, how are people coming up? They're just pulling this stuff out of nowhere, and they're just making stuff up, acting like they know what they're talking about, and they have no clue. Oh yeah, I've done that too. Folks, I love this because it's our way that we try to justify how things happen. Let me tell you truly what is happening. I want to show you this through Luke chapter 10, verses 19 and 20. Jesus is about to send out the disciples, and then he's going to send out the 72. But look what he says. He says, behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. Listen to what he's saying. You have a job to do. Listen, and because you are doing it in my name, I'm not going to let things like serpents or scorpions stop this. You will be able to tread over serpents and scorpions, and nothing will hurt you, because what you are accomplishing, I'm not going to let it be derailed by something like a snake bite. But look what it goes on to say. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. If you get to a situation and you have a snake bite you and you don't die, don't rejoice that you can survive a snake bite. Rejoice that your name is written in the book of heaven. Never miss the context. The context is the only reason why God blesses you is your name is written in the book of heaven. And in this process, as you go through, listen, I'm just going to tell you this. This has happened in my life. I believe there are times when there is something that could have derailed me and God goes, nope, I'm not letting that stop you. Because you are doing what God calls you to do. So let me take you back to the mountain. I was the most hurt of the entire group. I really had been hurt. And again, like I said, the doctors were just amazed that I woke up because of the head injury that I had. Not to mention what happened in my lungs. And in the process, there were 6 of us. 2 had gotten separated. We couldn't find them. So they were trying to find a way to get me out of the weather. They had put me between these 2 wedged rocks, and they were putting all of this wood around me, trying to keep the wind off of me. And one of my friends, whose name was Ted, goes, you know what we should be doing? We should be praising God because we're alive. He goes, we should sing. So they began to sing a praise song that at the time was important to us. And I remember laying on my left side because I couldn't lay on my right side, and I'm trying to sing along with them, but I can't breathe in too much. So I'm like, ooh, right? So I'm trying to be a part because at this moment I'm alive. Here's the coolest thing. As those guys sang out that song over and over again, the wind took their voices, and those two guys heard singing, followed the singing, and followed us, and we all got back together again. And in that process, you see that God is going, no, I'm not letting this. I have plans for you. And it was in that time period of singing that I had in my heart that God says, you're not going to die on this mountain. I have plans for you. Now, as a freshman in high school, I still was going to be a truck driver. Remember, truck driver family was going to be a truck driver. It wasn't until the end of my sophomore year that I decided I was going to go and be a pastor. But I believe that God goes, I'm not letting this mountain experience stop you from where I have you to go. Because I'm telling you, every doctor has said you shouldn't have survived. Folks, when we put our heart towards doing what God wants us to do to his glory, I just want you to understand, snake bites don't stop us. Because just back last week, Acts 27:24, and he said, do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar, and behold, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So when this snake clamps onto his hand, Paul goes, oh, I got to get to Caesar, and he shakes it off. Do you understand the concept? It's like, no, God told me I'm going to Caesar. This isn't going to stop me. Folks, that's what I want you to understand. When you know that God has made promises, and he has in his word, he has promised us eternity. He has promised that he's going to prepare a place for us. He has promised that he will give us nothing that we cannot handle. He has promised that he will give us joy in our sorrow. And if we live in that situation, then when those things come up and bite us, we can say, no, this is not what God has for me. Verse 7. Now, in the neighborhood of that place were lands belonging to the chief man of the island named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. 265 guys, he just begins to entertain them, take them in, take care of them. He is the chief of the island. Watch what happens. It happened that the father of Publius lay sick with a fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. So now they're going to winter here for 3 months. And God gives Paul a ministry to this island. And people are being cured, and people are being healed. And this king, and this is what I love, 276 men are going, oh my word. This guy told us that we would be in this, that the ship would be destroyed, but yet we would be saved, and told us we must run along on some island, and his God allows him to cure people. I'm telling you, I don't believe that there were any men on that ship that were not different because of their time with Paul. And this is what I want us to get to, folks. We have got to be the people of God who stand for God in the middle of storms and say, my God is faithful, so when things look the worst, they come to us. They come to us. The centurion goes, no, we're not losing Paul. Folks, as you deal with strife, as you deal with struggles, people are watching, and when you give glory to God because you know he's faithful, it does something more than a sermon will ever do or even reading scripture will ever do. It becomes this life example of someone who is putting these things into practice. But it gets better. Verse 10. They also honored us greatly. And when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. Remember I said that when they got to the island, all they had was the clothes on their back. As they leave the island, God has already used these people to give them what they need. He has already supplied them. And he had the supplies waiting for them on this island before the ship ever took off. And as they leave to go to Rome, which, by the way, I don't know if I'd want to get back on a boat, by the way. I don't know what it is. Snow, one of them was me getting lost in the mountains. Pretty much it goes, Jeff in snow, emergency room. Jeff in snow, emergency room. That's happened over and over and over again. So Jody's like a little ski bunny. She loves to ski. I'm the guy be like, I will be in the lodge come find me. Because I don't know what it is about, I don't know what it is. Me and snow, so to me, I just don't go to the snow. I believe in water skiing. I believe in melted snow is the much better way to go. But I'm just saying to you, I love the fact that as they get on the ship, and I can imagine, here we go. By the way, I'm going to spoil it for you. Nothing really happens. They get to Rome. But the idea of it is that in this process, God has already given them what they needed and supplied them for the next part of their journey. When you think everything is gone, know that God has the resources to supply your next need. God has the resources to supply your next need. So why is this important? Because it goes back to this. Paul goes to Jerusalem. He's beaten. Jesus visits him and says, Paul, don't worry. Be courageous. You're going to go to Rome. From there, he goes to Felix's prison and sits in Felix's jail for 2 years. After 2 years, he's handed over to a guy named Festus. Festus brings in the king of the area called Agrippa. They put him on a boat. That boat takes a little tour, which I like to call a 3-hour, 14-day tour. Ends up on an island, gets bitten by a snake, cures a bunch of people, and finally heads to Rome. That sounds a lot like my God. That he promises things, but folks, there's a different journey to get there than what we expect. But what he's asking for is our faithfulness. I want to end this message with this. I don't know if you're in a ship that you feel is in a storm. I don't know if temptation and you want to jump on the small boat and go your own way. I don't know where you're at, but let me just say this. The promises of God will never fail you. And I encourage you to be those who stand in the presence of people and say, I'm going to break bread and pray to my God because he's the one who is faithful. And when you do, it makes all the difference. May we be people that draw people to the glory of God through us being honestly full of faith for the one who is faithful back to us. And with that, let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for today. And it is a special day that we get to think about moms, and we get to think about, Father, how come they are significant to us. Father, would you just allow us today to just really sit in an understanding that no matter what our storms are, that you are there and you have what we need. And Father, that even, snake bites can't get in the way of us if we're following you. I love you and I thank you. I ask you to be with us as we journey through your word. All in the name of your son, Jesus. Amen. Let me